It was my strategy to invite Bjarke to fill this auditorium in, so I'm very happy that at least that worked. And actually, I'm going to talk entire 1.5 hours, and he's going to just listen. I'm just kidding. So the structure is such that we will structure this talk in past, present, and future. So past is an introduction of this conversation, how we frame this conversation to be, and also introduction of my work for 30 minutes. And present, we would like to show each other the current projects and preoccupation and critique each other. And future conversation, including yourself. So let's start from the exhibition progress. Since the exhibition here at the Barbican was created to show the progress of OMA, I would like to talk about how progress is measured in OMA. As OMA has changed since REM started OMA with, 4 other partners, three other partners. Obviously, each had their own interest, and now OMA is a partnership of 7 people with completely different people. Some of which you like more than the others. These are just likes of all the talks that they had. But intriguing thing is that with all the partners together, it was 86 hits, and of course, REM alone scores 96. So, the partnership is a sign of progress in OMA. Because by definition, progress is forward movement towards a goal. And obviously, our goal is not to have an office named such as a law firm, a conglomeration of individuals. So how do we measure OMA's progress? How do we measure by its revenue and profits? We are not actually allowed to talk about it, so I won't go in. Or is it acknowledgement? This is the media coverage per year. Of course, it's going up, but is that a sign of progress? Or is progress measured by a certain influence OMA has within the field? But lately, we are losing so many competitions, so I'm not even sure about that. And proving that point, it's hard to see, but the blue line is BIG line in a Google search, and the red line is OMA search. So after it was amazing leap of Bjarke since 2006, he went over OMA in 1 year and now doubling the search. Also, I'm very critical to the kind of outside view of OMA. For example, critics are actually speculating end of OMA quite often. Even in the public discourse, this was one of the blogs. I thought for some reason they were dying. I'm glad they were very much live. So I'm really trying to understand what progress means for OMA. Is it an expansion? Yes, we have many projects all over the world. We have 5 offices. We are about to open a new one in Middle East. Or is it amount of built project? But as you know well, OMA has a very good record of not building. So what you see in gray is a built project. What you see in blue is an unbuilt. But lately, the ratio is, of course, getting better and better. And what's interesting right now is that the built project, unbuilt, and AMO project is like basically 1/3. OMA has always expanded its thinking and notion beyond architecture, and that enabled OMA to take many different types of projects. But is this multiplication of OMA's interest how we would measure the progress? I personally think so, but somehow this is also just very, very much of a one aspect. And OMA's expansion is not just the thinking, but also its X's and generations that came after. So these are just kind of people who were very successful, or are successful, and it's growing. These are the people. But my problem right now is that now OMA successfully created a partnership. These individuals are inherently inside OMA, not outside. That, being outside, creating a new generation was part of the aura of OMA. So is it very counterproductive to have a partnership? So I would like to talk about the generations, and that's why I invited Bjarke. And this is a famous theory about generation. We have two generations now. Rem is exactly the same age as my parents, and Rem is prophet and having a crisis at his elderlyhood, and me too, having a midlife crisis per their theory. So this is also a right moment to talk about the generation. Generation has been always characterized, well, let's say the progress on the generation is always characterized by the opposition that they made to the previous group. So how Team 10 did to Siam, or how Japan metabolism to kind of reductivism, and also Venturi, how he went against the previous visions. So when I interviewed them, of course, this is the first thing they would like to say. And I was always, in a way, jealous of having such a strong reaction to the previous regime, because we didn't really have a strong regime when I, for example, studied architecture. So that's why I was also interested in inviting Bjarke, because Bjarke inherently stated here that he's not interested in going against anything, but he believes that evolution is on basically accepting and saying yes, but still changing. Bjarke and I overlapped a little bit. We are almost born at the same time as OMA, and then joined OMA 98, 97, and he worked on and off for 3 or 4 years, and then he went of his own, and I just stayed always within OMA. So you can see what the contrast is. Also, I was interested in inviting him since he also made a partnership, and I wanted to know how he's thinking about OMA's partnership. Also, of course, he's a cultivator of the territory that the young generation can appear. I mean, I always try to follow him wherever he is. So that was the beginning. And now I go into a marathon of my introduction. Basically, my introduction can only be my work at OMA, unfortunately. So I will show key projects that I have done in the office. This is the GDP growth of Japan. As you can see, it's marked by a couple of big crises, and it has a steady decline since 60s and 70s. This is the overlay of my own key moment of life. Born, attends university, becomes partner. So it always coincides with a big crisis. So I think that I'm doomed to live with a crisis as a Japanese architect. And I was always interested in what it means. This is my parents' GDP, and it's my lifetime GDP. And if you overlay, there's a huge gap, of course. And I was always interested in knowing what that means. I can analyze a little bit. For example, in 60s and 70s, Japanese architects made many grand visions talking about the country. Now our generation is forced to talk about pet architecture or niches. 60s and 70s, they had the sense of gravity, sense of edge, sense of color, sense of material. Now the mainstream Japanese architecture is all white, no sense of gravity, no sense of corner, etc. I call that Muji architecture. Basically, Muji is known as a kind of Japanese aesthetics, but I completely resent that observation because, in my opinion, Muji is a sign of long time decline that lost its interest to cherish the diversity. This was made by Muji. It's a 6 shades of grays. So when I saw this, I thought that it's not healthy to just believe in this regime. So when I was always interested in the potential of decline, so I did a couple of researches at universities in America. So as opposed to the decline of the stock indicator, we think that human indicators such as these things will go up. For example, when the economy is down, often the most project that gets done is religious architecture and healthcare. And this is, for example, a mega church in America that is attached to a mall that is increasingly becoming strong in the suburbs. And also, it's proven in history that many inventions are actually made through the recession. And not to mention, many architectural and urban manifestos were written during the recession. As you can imagine, when you don't have work, you have time to write. So my life, you can of course characterize as a global nomad going between those canyons of ups and downs. So this is how my life has been in OMA. For example, starting from American project, Universal Headquarters, doing a collective tower. I don't go into it too much. Block 6, it's a cinema complex with mega stores in the OMA master plan in north of Amsterdam. The idea was to use the inclination of cinemas to have some kind of public space in between the mega stores and the cinema. It was built, it's hard to see, but you see KFC and Burger King. It's kind of nice to for once hold such a tenant in your building. It's a shopping center. I go very fast. This was a competition in Italy for Genoa, this Pier Ponte Parodi, to do a kind of cultural destination. They didn't even specify program, no budget, no how to do it. So we were, from the beginning, very skeptical. So we were asked to submit a master plan, which we just turned into an interview to Italian thinkers. So we asked all these questions. Does Genoa need anything? To all the Italian thinkers, and call that as a master plan. So it was conducted with, of course, with Hans Ulrich, and then Stefano. And in the end, a lot of people said, you don't need anything anymore in Genoa. So we confronted to do nothing. So we questioned, how do you do nothing? So we decided to commit to just subtracting. So we erased the whole buildings, except one tower, detached it from the context as an island, and even excavated to become a kind of pit in the sea as a cruise terminal and the event space. And then I moved on. Whitney Museum was one of my first projects to run. The idea was to make other spaces than the gallery to have more enhanced art experiences, such as circulation and shop and restaurants, etc. And it was impossible task that you were supposed to build a new building next to it, but the next building was preserved by the landmark, so you had to find a very small footprint to launch the building. So this was the shape. And also to deal with different scale of art, a pre-war in a brownstone, and the post-war contemporaries in the Breuer building and the new media art and so on in our building. It got unanimous approval, but somehow after 911 it went magically kind of negative, and then it was given to Renzo Piano. Even he, as it says, respectful approach here, got opposition, so it didn't happen. But there's a conspiracy theory that actually OMA and Renzo Piano is the same office, because we always start and he always takes over. I even did many stores. This is a Prada Brompton in Brompton Road, former Porsche garage, pretty run down. Prada was, for the first time, very interested in showing all the brands that they had in one stores, and also cultural program. A little bit inspired by the Comme des Garçons market. So this was one of the ideas, to make everything into pedestals in a different size, almost like a city. But it has some faces that you can, seemingly random, you can start to organize things in an array order and create vague zones. But in the end, what we did was to make use of the obscure shape and a very narrow entrance, almost like a La Villette proposal, but each wall becomes kind of function. And then you go through a wall to wall, not knowing how long it's gonna last. We were interested in creating some kind of endless experience. It did not happen. Many things I show, as you can see, didn't happen. This was a store in Shanghai for Prada, in the Bund. In the Bund, one side is a post-colonial, very expensive stores. The other side is completely opposite, very public and touristic destination. So we were interested in actually making the longest store in the world on the other side, under the boardwalk. So basically only consists of the storefront. What was interesting then is that, of course, by its sheer length, it has many different conditions within the store. And you can also have parking running behind you, so you have a very strange juxtaposition, sometimes hidden. And also we were interested in incorporating local stores within it so that it can blend in with Prada store. It did not happen, of course. This one also did not happen. This one is in Den Haag. I show you this because I did this competition just before CCTV competition, and it has some link. In Den Haag, they have been planning a high-rise for ages, but there's always opposition from the conservatives. So they have a kind of complex to the skyline. Our project was there in the yellow area where all the kind of different area comes together, so it sits on the edge. So what we did is to make a building that really marks the edge. So 3 entities, station side, city side, and the park side. So, and then, because of the heavy traffic at the ground level, we made almost like a reverse skyline, knowing that The Hague had the complex of the skyline. So it became this kind of almost like an animal-like building. It was, of course, going over the site, and there was a risk to lose this competition because of that. So like 2 days before the presentation, we decided to cut the building and then argue that some things can be still beautiful without the arm. So, and we actually won, and we have developed it, but somehow now it's cancelled. CCTV, as Kate said, I was running it till DD. It's a competition model. It was in plaster. But after we presented, client came back to us and said, we would like to push your project, but to show it to a higher level, they will not understand if the building is made out of plaster. So we had to make a new model in China like for 5 days, just within 5 days. And then we went to this kind of typical Chinese model shop and then made it. I was hospitalized during those operations. Just showing. And this was the model. Also, we had to make a new book, this blue book. We, of course, made many books that argues for details, but they said that that doesn't work, so just be very simple. So it was one side a text and the other side the image. So the text, a new identity, boom. Different from every angle, boom. Humane working environment, boom. It was really refreshing after knowing the kind of book culture of OMA to be so simple and powerful, because you can imagine that whatever image comes next to this text always works. A different it didn't need to be this building, so somehow very refreshing. This was, I guess this was not achieved. Value for money. The team was so big that it almost became like every time you present something, it became like a lecture. Also presentation, you can see how many people were involved. Second year, third year. It's a very complex building, but we have a public route. It's about to open this year, finally. This was a process. There's a different expansion because the exposure to the sun is different on both towers. So we had to find a particular moment of the day to join. So it was early morning. This was the last moment. That's the last beam to connect. It looks like this guy's single-handedly kind of correcting the gap, but it's not. He's just making his effort. And then it's got connected like a bridge, and then started to complete. The structure was very simple. We applied a homogeneous grid and analyzed the stress, and what you see in red is in compression, what you see in blue is in tension. So we took out members from the tension, and we added at the compression. That made an irregular pattern. And of course, that pattern is now recognized by Simpsons too. And this is the current situation. This is a lobby. At one moment, it was a kind of, at night, a dark donut, canceling all the lights around it. That was beautiful. But now, with the lighting, it also states the kind of negative space that holds. I would like to show you one competition, a high-rise competition we did after CCTV. It was a very contrasting competition because you did such an expressive one in China. This was in Tokyo, in the financial district, but it was for school. 3 schools together. One is fashion, one is computer, and one is medical. But it had to be in the same building, so we studied many things. But in the end, we decided to respond to this kind of dead skyscrapers in Tokyo, and almost like a Michelangelo's half-done work, almost excavating and exposing the activity of the building with pixels. At this moment, after CCTV, and especially the height of kind of formal agendas of all the star architects, this project was considered very unpopular and hideous, the pixels. But somehow, I think it was one of the first projects that pixel was strongly promoted again. Shenzhen Stock Exchange, as you know, it's almost done. It's a lifted podium and creates a public plaza underneath and communicates the stock info at the soffit. I also did this competition, but I'm actually happy that not just because it's getting done, but also the wake of kind of Occupy Wall Street, if it really happens in China, if it ever happens in China, I'm sure that it's going to be this building, because it's very easy to relate the two things. Jersey City is a mixed-use building in New Jersey across Manhattan. Ironically, the renaissance of Jersey City came after 9/11, when financial sector moved to the other side of the river. Developer came with this sketch for us to do it, but we said no. But we decided to create something totally unknown from very known formula of developers. So we analyzed the kind of formula of each given program and conceived ideal block sizes for each, and then stacked them on top of each other like a wooden block. So almost assembling an existing building on top of each other. That creates a vertical public spaces throughout the building. Facade was also made deliberately very banal to emphasize the fact that this is just an assembly of buildings around. Of course, the effect was maximum, and the developer was very happy because in each box there's a perfect layout, and there's an iconic view to it. We did another tower in Mexico for 2010. It was supposed to be the tallest tower for Mexico City. For Latin America. The site was very small, next to the at the edge of the park and the city. The footprint became 40 by 40, which is pretty small to hold a skyscraper of 300 meters in the earthquake zone. So we decided, and also developer wanted to have more area, so we decided to grow at the center where all the other buildings are, at the 100-meter datum, and pulled that part towards the park and created a form like this, which we pitched to them. It's like a combination of two pyramids. One side is straight, so it looks a little sober from this side, but from the park side it has a dramatic belly. Well, speaking about belly, we started to talk about this building as a pregnant building because it really looks like a pregnant. So we decided to conceive a child, which is that, which we didn't know what it is. In the end, it became a shaft, a kind of atrium that opens to two different directions and brings light to the darker part of the office. So it became an object within the tower that you can look up to the sky or look down to the park. The structure, we didn't want to do something very heavy-handed because it's an earthquake zone. So we decided to use mobilize a very small cable-like structure, 30-centimeter diameter, and then apply that as almost like a louver around the building. So it creates almost like a veil, like transparency, and also during the day it creates a sun shading. After we announced it, there was almost like 2 weeks. Every day they had a protest. And what's amazing is that they always redraw, regardless of you provide a press kit, they always redraw in their favor. And then they also use this kind of children and very nice poetic way of protesting. And in the end, it was analyzed as an upside-down coffin, and as they wanted, it got canceled. Last two projects. This is a residential tower in New York, in 22nd Street. It's an area where the various towers are standing. Our client already had built that thin, tall tower called One Madison Park and wanted to add a new one behind it. At that point, all the architects were desperate to create added value to the condominium by shape or facade or reference. But since Flatiron was very close to it, we thought that we wanted to be as effortless as Flatiron. So we looked at the conditions. So this is the existing building, the tall one, and ours were much smaller, but sharing the base. So in a way, a kind of unequal twin. Also in the plan, the taller one had a bigger footprint, and we only had 33 feet, which is about 10 meters. What was interesting was the developer had the air rights and buildable floor area represented in blue, but he didn't want to go higher than 250 feet because he was afraid that he's going to lose the contract he already had for the other building. So we said, okay, we're going to just sway away from this building after that line, and also doing the same to bring the light below. That somehow resembled the old New York typology, but also mirrored at the bottom. So it could look very normal from a certain angle, or it could look like a kind of shy child behind its parents, or it could look like a parasite, or it could look like a completely unknown building. This is from 22nd Street, in between two towers, and then this is from 23rd Street. We mobilize a structure to hold these buildings. So you can see that it changes the density of the wall at the center. So at the center, it almost acts like a corset, and it provides a different typology. So in the bigger plan, it has a punched window condition, panoramic, and also at the top, when you're liberated from the structural need, it became almost like a loft and transparent. Developer wanted to have a metal facade, but we wanted to have concrete, so we took in between. We said concrete is in a way a hybrid of metal and cement already, so why don't we kind of, as if the rebars are exposed, have both. So it's a concrete panels with mirrored stainless steel exposed. So it captures the light in a slightly more subtle way. It had a screening room at the bottom for creative artist agency. So we wanted to use that natural slope to create a lobby that is interesting than just a typical condominium lobby. So we organized multiple programs on the slope, and then made it almost like a gigantic step where you can see from the street to the other side. So when the screening starts, the curtain closes and you are isolated. We had to also provide a sales office. Sales office is where you basically, of course, sell the units. But the cheapest unit was almost $7 million. So you can never catch a guy who wants to pay $7 million for your condo on the street. So we thought that the sales office can be something a little bit more playful. So we literally laid the building fit to the space in Soho, like this. And then use the window pattern as a kind of spectacle. Almost became too dizzy for people to negotiate. So in the end, it was used for something else, like photo shoots. We thought this is going to be the first building after such a long time of delirious New York, almost like a hidden child. But again, this didn't happen. Well, Maddie is here today, but and also we thought that this building had the upward shape, but of course, if you look at it from the other side, it has a downward shape. Okay, the last one. It's a build project. So the Cornell University's extension, it's rare moment, but I want to say this first, that we were the third architect to do this. So typically we were the first and we kind of make a mess and someone takes over again. But this time we were the third, so we were very treated, let's say, relatively better, or people were very eager to finish the project. That was also very good context. So this is the Faculty of Art, Architecture, and Planning, housed in 4 different buildings, created at the northern edge of Cornell. But northern edge was neglected, although it has the potential to have exposure to the very famous gorge. So what we did is to conceive a building basically entirely based on the existing building lines, almost like a mini plaza. And typically box is always freestanding, but here the box is defined by the buildings. And it became almost like a mini quad on the north side. It spans over the existing buildings. And there's a bus stop underneath. So because it's defined by existing building, it has very strange views sometimes like this. You see buildings on both sides. In order to achieve this cantilever, we had to have big trusses. But if you do Vierendeel, which is efficient to provide a circulation through it, but it's too expensive, conventional truss has many dead spaces, so we combined two types of trusses and then analyze the moment and honestly express that moment. So you can see the forces from center to the edge becoming gradually to truss. It was fabricated in Canada, shipped. The fascia panel, it's actually a marble, it's not artificial. And the studio was almost like a one big open space, so we could be involved from the beginning to program and involved in the pedagogical issues too, so that was also a very refreshing moment. Now it's open to students. They started to use the truss in such a way that we didn't imagine, and also because it's a one big open space, people started to play well inside the building. The ceiling is utilized for chilled beam and data transportation, light, everything basically, and the ducting, of course. It's a very complex ceiling, as opposed to a very minimum and straightforward concrete slab. We also had the concrete dome underneath, which is almost like a landscape mound that penetrates and into the plate above that provides the access and auditorium and a dome space underneath. It was very complex geometry, so we had to have a very elaborate mold and cast in 24 hours, like continuously. In the end, this kind of mound space is very popular to the students. And of course, some introduction of urban activity within campus, which is nice. We used the motif of American tin ceiling, blew up twice as big, and then pressed in perforated aluminum panels. That we wanted to provide a sense of interior, although there's many exterior covered spaces. This is a dome. It's an auditorium. That you have a panoramic view around it. And the chair flips down, so it becomes like a bench, but it could also become a normal seating. And this space was also going to be used for the boardroom, so there's a hidden chair on the floor to provide a boardroom for twice a year that happens in this space, multi-configurable. This is a dome crit space. There's a big elevator that acts as a freight elevator for the students. This is a bathroom which consists of one single stainless steel wall that divides two genders in one wall. So you're always sitting next to a different gender, sitting or standing. And the roof is a green roof that simulates continuity of the green of the arts court to the more denser green towards the gorge. These I don't say anything, but we are working on certain projects. I'm not allowed to, but just a glimpse of it. But this one, specifically, I want to ask Bjarke's opinion. We are doing similarly like BIG on the west side a project in Manhattan. So the site is at Weehawken Street on the west side. It's a very peculiar street because it's only one tiny block left towards the West Side Highway. So you have a very discrete street at the edge of the highway. I had many identities throughout the history. But the interesting thing is that typically the West Side always focuses on its view, but here it had the potential to reconnect this West Side to the city, back to the city. And the client owned multiple sites, so the idea was to combine sites in such a way that you can create almost like a neighborhood and make this street and also exterior Market Street and also interior street. The program was some kind of art-related program. Also, we are studying how it can house either within it or hidden or like two big spaces on either side of the street. So this is the current situation. I really am showing something that is so fresh that, sorry, my explanation is not so trained. So this is a Weehawken Street that could be themed on many other events. So we did two schemes. So this is a zoning and FAR. So you can add, let's say, just 2 levels on existing buildings. But we liked the kind of roofscapes created in a courtyard by different buildings. So we wanted to kind of use that as a motif. So first thing we did was to, like the ground floor, create a very consistent flat residential block on top to have very elaborate in-between space. So this is all as of right. So you're always underneath this flat plane or the roof. This was another option. Although we thought this was interesting, this is a view from Weehawken Street looking up. It's as of right, but it's very intrusive to the existing historical structure, we thought. And if you look around, there are so many tall buildings around it. So we thought maybe we can do something else. And this is a kind of extrusion of courtyard, similar to Whitney, that is not so visible from the street. But we added some kind of a commercially viable block to it, which is, well, you still see it, but we think it's less intrusive. And then we studied with kind of light penetrations, again, some kind of almost like a crystal shape that has a reflective surface. So you can almost reflect the activity of the roofscapes below. So my basic question is, Bjarke's office is also dealing with many big-scale urban and commercial projects, and this is a kind of analysis that we have for the mixed-use project. This is the city of Tokyo. It's big enough to hold many different districts or atmospheres or characters represented by different colors. If you compare that to a kind of table dinner, like it's a kind of a la carte, very diverse and conversation stimulator type of dinner with many ingredients. But lately there are so many projects that package the ingredients in such a way that your experience becomes almost homogeneous. So what used to be very different in each area became kind of similar, which we call that almost like a bento box project. So your experience is somewhat consistent, but not so different. So what used to be very diverse and interesting became very predictable and not interesting. So that's kind of although I'm not denying the potential of the mixed-use buildings, we often have confrontation that what kind of program we have to bring in order to make the buildings special. Thanks. So now Bjarke will.
So maybe we, I don't know, otherwise I'm going to forget everything you showed. Okay. I mean, I think one thing we talked about before today, like last minute, was in a way like there's always this risk that it just becomes like two parallel lectures. Mm-hmm. And then also because obviously if you want to make a really interesting discussion, the best way to do it is to find two people that really hate each other, or at least hate each other's work, and it's not totally the case in this case. So it could be also like this incredibly friendly conversation where there's all this sort of mutual respect. It's also like very hard to get architects to criticize each other publicly, at least. But I think maybe just to pick up on the whole notion, because I mean, we thought that maybe one thing that could be interesting was to show something that is currently interesting us, and I think maybe this idea of always like doing mixed use, like combining everything in the same place, I think is if I agree that it's essentially one of the challenges of globalization is that it can sort of lead to the fact that you have the same KFC and Maggie D's everywhere you go. What is like the British rapper, The Streets? I don't know if he's still alive, but KFC, Maggie D, no more choices in the city, and I think that's very that's super relevant. But I think one of the things that have guided our way of working, and essentially what we mean when we say yes is more, this idea of an inclusive approach to architecture, which is also which is not only that the architecture itself is inclusive, that invites maybe people to interact with the buildings or create spaces for the public to invade, but also that the process is inclusive. And I think in globalization and in this, like, things become more and more mixed use, that in a way is watering out the specificity of having an opera house and then having a big bank. I think there's also like an amazing potential to try to then find out what could these interactions be. And I think in each, it's almost like this sort of, we call it architectural alchemy, but this sort of almost like when you combine different chemical compounds, if you just mix it together, like if you mix all the different colors together, you get gray goo, and that's what's essentially happening. But you can also get an impressionistic painting. So I think whenever you see these conditions, that there is an incredible potential to really play with those ingredients.
But how are you dealing with it in BIG? Do you have a discussion about another mixed use, how to deal with that condition, or you are merging yourself completely into the developers so that you have a say in ingredients? I mean, that's two different ways, I guess.
I mean, I think in our case, like our case is almost the opposite. It was more like sort of we've done so much sort of affordable housing that when there was finally like even a baker store on the ground floor, we would say, yee-hoo! It's like it's a new program.
Yeah, but now after doing Baker's store like 20 times.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think in a bizarre way, I mean, of course, like, we and I, you know, like everybody else, we dream about doing beautiful little cultural projects or like public buildings, but
you are doing.
Yeah, like it's a relatively recent phenomenon, and I think what landed on our table was in the beginning housing, and then increasingly mixed use, and I think if you look at the city, like 99% of the city is like developer-driven mediocrity, and I think architects have been sort of traditionally almost exclusively focused on the sort of the cultural landmark or the one corporate headquarter of a bank, and I think, you know, there are a few architects, like Le Corbusier is definitely one that sort of jumps to mind, that sort of took upon him to really try to think about and sort of innovate the generic tissue that constitutes most of our cities.
We are not denying the existence of mixed use, but I'm just curious, because we know the problem, or we think it's a problem, how you are you dealing with it, or you're just designing a building, a mixed use more and more will generate basically a condition that there is a slightly better mixed use than before, because someone like you are designing it.
Yeah, in a way, I think it's, I mean, we could try to scoot in an opera house every time we get a mixed use, and here the opera house, but the client wouldn't probably go for it. I mean, I think to the extent, I think in a way, like you, I mean, as architects, we are in a way doomed to constantly cook with ingredients that someone else has purchased for us. And in that sense, like, I will happily take on this challenge also because, like, in a lot of these cases, I think what you can do, and what you may be also doing with the last project you showed, is that you can try to, like, really radically recombine these ingredients in ways that will produce new possibilities. And I think as architects, in a way, like, if you're very successful, and you're Japanese, so you're probably going to live to be 100. But if you're very successful, maybe you'll build, I don't know how many completed buildings was in your presentation that you've been in charge of, but I think it was 2, right?
Yeah.
Well,
so 3.
So let's say you speed up, but maybe you can do 50 buildings. So I think where we can really have a massive impact in a good way is if the projects we do, you deal with situations that are, you know, the generic mixed use, for instance, and then each time you get that challenge, you really respect the challenge, but you do it in a way that shows new combinations of the well-known material, like another rice dish, but it's a completely new one. And each time you do this, and if you actually get away with it, you create an example that allows your colleagues all across the planet to actually show to a potential client. And, like, because in a way, like, the most efficient architects are the ones that probably built the most, and they're probably the ones that suffer the least in trying to come up with something interesting. But at least you provide an innovation for the copiers to copy, like, or a typology. You open up a new typology that can be followed through.
So speaking of a progress, what did you think of the exhibition? You saw it, right?
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm already sold. You know, I sort of SML Excel came out when I started studying architecture, and having sort of dried out, I had no previous interest in architecture. It was a little bit by accident that I ended up in architecture school, and I went through all these different like very sort of short love affairs with various architects, and like really all of them, including like people like Hans Hollein for a short while. But when I sort of discovered first it was like some conversations with students from Rice University, where Kolas was speaking, and Sanford Quinter wrote a piece about comparing architecture to the dogfighting skills of Chuck Yeager, some American dogfighting hero. And then, you know, so I'm totally sold, and I know a lot of the work, and I really liked it, and I thought like curatorially it was kind of fresh and it's sort of shabby chic. But I dragged actually one of my friends who is a complete architecture virgin, and I really had to work hard to make it worth his while. Like in a way, like I really had to sort of explain everything to him, because like in a sense,
for example,
if you want to criticize a little bit, it's slightly introverted. That it's a very interesting exhibition if you're already familiar with the work, and then you can get to read all of the secret faxes from the trash bin. So in that sense, it's like for the obsessive stalker-esque fan, it's, you know, it's great. So I had a good time, but I constantly had to sort of.
But how did you make the architecture virgin excited, for example?
No, but then you would have to.
Because I would like to know the technique.
But I think it is the dilemma. Like essentially, I would have to do like.
Now I know how you train yourself every day. Always hang out with architecture virgins and explain.
Exactly. No, but seriously, like, because in a way, like, you know, like I would really have to do like these song and dance at every model, and you know, like, it was kind of, I think it started kind of bad. We went into the secret room with all the secret faxes, and then we went in there, and there was a Chinese gentleman standing there. And then suddenly he left, and then we just realized that the guy farted and left us in this confined space. So like we felt completely abused. But then that's all right. You know, you can always start with a fart joke. No, but seriously, no. But then, and I think it is the kind of dilemma. Like we had a collaboration with Bruce Mao back in 2004 for the Venice Biennale. And we had this incident where we had to find out what was this. It was going to be. We were co-curating the Danish Pavilion in Venice Biennale, and we had to figure out what was going to be. And as part of it, we sort of toured him through our office and showed him different things. And we were working on a study on the future of the waterways of Copenhagen, like looking at the harbor activities. And we were coming up to this conclusion that you could make all of Denmark, the gateway to the Baltic Sea, and capture the hinterland of all of the former Soviet Union and 300 million people there, sort of really revitalizing Denmark's harbor activities and turning it into sort of a pivoting point like Rotterdam is to Western Europe. And so I explained him the project, and he said, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to do 7 of these projects. It's going to be 7 new Denmarks, and this is one of them. He had to catch a plane, so he said, can you email me the PowerPoint that you just showed me? So yeah, of course, and we emailed it to him, and then Amanda Ramos, his project leader, wrote back, no, Bruce wants the PowerPoint that Bjarke showed him when he was in the office. And it was like, this is the PowerPoint. And then he said something quite, I think, true, which is that he's been struggling with quite, because he always sees this, that architecture somehow fails to capture people's imagination or their curiosity or their excitement, their engagement. But when you actually do visit an architect's office and you walk around and he or she like explains you what's going on, and you get like all of the backstage and you really see how things take shape, it becomes like alive. Or if you go to a construction site or even a finished building with the author, like all these things come to life, but it's just very hard to capture when the architecture is absent. And in a way, in a very, very banal way, that's what we tried to do with the SS More, was which was like a book and an exhibition, was to simply putting a narrator, in this case myself, so it would feel as if you were going through the work with the architect and getting the stories behind. But I think So I think that's the one challenge maybe the show has, is that I really had to work to get Thomas to get it.
Thomas. Okay. Now I want to interview Thomas. But what about the partnership? Like, I don't know. I mean, I personally didn't think that the show didn't capture the partnership so well, except at the talk we had. But no, you know most of the partners and the system of the partner now that you implemented it. What is it? I mean, of course, for you, is it to make the office work? Or is it a partnership as a true partnership? I don't know what that means, but. Or is, as I said, is partnership productive for OMA?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I think one thing, like in a bizarrely premature way, like we're dealing with similar issues actually, and I think one of the challenges of architects is that if you look at a lot of the significant architects that have sort of in retrospect really contributed to sort of architectural history, and I can't think of any greater recent architect than OMA and Rem Koolhaas. They have always been suffering from the fact that they only start to dealing with what's going to happen now. Once they're like, I'm not saying that Rem is dying, but like when it's about to be too late.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it becomes this sort of last minute thing. And I think in many ways, like obviously when you look at OMA, it has successfully created a culture, maybe especially in the way that a lot of architects who went through there, like we all have like a lot of friends from just the short time we were there at the same time.
But let me then rephrase the question. You were considered, of course, many times ex-OMA, although probably you went far beyond it. But what is it? I mean, that's a kind of one feeling that I still don't know after 10 plus years, that to be an ex-OMA, and although you're putting a lot of effort on your original work, you know, sometimes there's a kind of easy writing about your identity and your thinking. And that's what I was trying to say, that, you know, typically there could be someone who could strongly go against Rem in order to evolve or progress. But somehow, like we can only find you who is very successful, kind of embraced probably the not going against.
No, but I think that is the trick of evolution. Because I mean, I think, you know, and that's the whole potential of evolution rather than revolution, which is also one of the things we sort of aware of, is that, you know, modernism was this idea of a revolution where you're going to tear down all of downtown Paris, and then you're going to plant like nice new skyscrapers in a park, and you're going to leave like 2 or 3 monuments. And then, you know, and thankfully Le Corbusier didn't get away with it, because it would have been like a sad loss for everyone. Because like cities are existing, ongoing, sort of continuous collective efforts, and I think the idea of evolution is that you basically, you know, I always believe that you became a better architect by studying architecture. Like this idea of doing something like original without reference is like naive and like almost uneducated and uninformed. But I think like if you constantly continue what you set out on, and you know, I didn't leave OMA because you know, I no longer liked the you know, Rem or the work we were doing at OMA. It was simply I just couldn't do any more deadlines in Rotterdam. Like no, like I think it was I somehow felt that you know, I got it, and also that there were ways, there were like things in the organization of OMA, also like as everybody probably knows, the temper and persona of Rem has also created an environment where like alpha male behavior is happening more unchecked than it does in the rest of the civilized world, and it can be a cumbersome and stressful work environment. And I simply enjoy being happy too much to endure it. But in many ways, like what I've tried to do is to retain the integrity of our work, but try to create an environment that is maybe different.
But I'm not. It's actually hard to find someone who is successful after a master, or not master, apprentice, but who is going completely against it. Of course, everyone is taking some good part of your, experience, and then try to develop that further. So what you said? You just said you got it. So what did you get? Maybe because it seems like I still didn't get it.
It's funny, like.
So that's why.
This is how it goes.
I want to have it set in stone today, so that.
No, it's funny. I
can leave tomorrow.
I was. So here's the kit. No, I was when I was studying. I was sharing an apartment with a good friend of mine from kindergarten, basically, and he went to study psychology, and he was totally into organization psychology and sociology and like management theory, group dynamism, and we had a lot of, and this was before I came to OMA. So we had a lot of discussions about creative processes and how this was like the early 90s or mid 90s, where everybody was talking about, chaos theory, complexity theory, creative management was this organization is this organization, how you would structure a framework that would allow sort of emergent properties, self-organizing teams that could reconfigure, blah, blah, blah. So I was like very aware of management theory in a way when I came to the office, and I was trying to spend a lot of time when I was there, I was also like, I had always thought that OMA was much more coherent than it was. I had a feeling that I was the only one who read SML Excel, for instance, when I was there. Like, I was constantly referring to stuff, and then people were like, what? Like mostly what I noticed was that it was actually that people came from other famous offices and were doing like a tour. So like a lot of people, I didn't get it. Like a lot of people had worked for years for like Peter Eisenman or Daniel Liebeskind, and I was like, what are you doing here? Like, but there was one thing, and then the other thing was like I was constantly trying to ask whenever, like the 2 times I had like a direct interaction with Rem. To what extent his feedback was strategic. Because like
you asked him that.
Yeah, exactly. Because like we were exactly. So like if he was deliberately holding back, or if he was like being deliberately vague to allow space for creativity to blossom, and he said something very interesting. He says, if I'm being vague, it's simply because I don't know. It's like so, fuck. It was pretty, and then I quit. No.
But you just said something interesting. You didn't understand people who came from Jean Nouvel or other offices, but there are so many people that we hire ex-BIG people now, or you hire ex-OMA. That's fine.
No, but I was just like, back then I was certain, because
I know that you are.
I was certain that this was like a very clear cult, and what I really imagined, like what I discovered, was that you don't have to spell it out. Actually, like you just have to provide the conditions where things can happen, and I'm realizing something very similar now. Like I constantly like encounter that people suspect that I have a very clear plan with the things we're doing, and in a way there is some kind of intuitive sort of understanding, but I really think And this is very true, and maybe this could tie in, like, I just wanted to show you one project we're working with. But I think there is this, Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, said, life is lived forward, but it's understood backwards. And I think in so many times you base your dispositions on things that are simply at the time between A and B. B seems the better choice. It doesn't seem like a brilliant choice, but at least you know why you're choosing B. It's not part of some kind of a goal or a plan. And then, like, gradually, as you look back, you can really see like a consistency in your behavior, and you start realizing once you got there, that this was what it was all about. And I think to allow this to happen is a major part of it. But maybe I show you this one idea, and then we can talk a little bit about architecture and maybe a little bit about partnership also.
Okay.
So essentially, like, it's not going to be like 40 minutes of lecture. Like, I just wanted to show this one thing, because like also as architects, it's always more fun to talk about the latest stuff you're working on, because like that's really what's on your mind right now. And I'd like to show this one project that somehow made us realize something that we've been working on or towards almost like since we started, but that we didn't really sort of spell out until now. This is Park City in Utah. It's a former mining town that has turned into a ski resort. Essentially, so basically like the plumes of smoke from the past. Maybe I'll get rid of this. The plumes of smoke from the past have now turned into like sort of clouds from the snow cannons, and in many ways, like, I didn't know this before now, but like actually the first ski lift that was ever invented was actually not invented. It was a reappropriation of a decommissioned a mining lift that was like designed to drag silver down from the mines. And then as the mines dried out, they had to do something. So they started dragging skiers up on the mountain instead to sort of transform this former industry into leisure. And it's the same with Park City, essentially. It was the host of the Olympics 10 years ago, and most people know it for the Sundance Festival. That when Robert Redford like bought the Sundance Ranch, he opened this festival, and it's really become sort of this sort of cultural mecca in the middle of the mountains. And this sort of tendency that seems to be prevailing like almost everywhere in society, or like the constant reinvention or reappropriation of decommissioned infrastructure of industry into other sort of social purposes, is also embedded in this art center called the Kimball, which is essentially a repurposed garage. It actually started being a horse stable, then it became a garage, and now it's an art center, and they wanted to sort of expand. And right next to it, you can see this big wooden building. It was called the Coalition Building, and it was essentially where the lifts with silver came down from the mountain. Now this is where you have the town lift arriving with skiers, and it was sort of unloaded onto the trains. And it really stood at this sort of landmark of this sort of industrial mining town. Sadly, it burned down in the 80s, and it's gone now. So we were asked to look at the Kimball, the garage, and look at an extension of it. And essentially, since they built this new big road, it has become the main entry point to Park City from the outside, from Deer Valley Drive, is right there. So the Kimball is not only sort of the cultural and sort of social node of Park City, it's also really the sort of infrastructural node. And basically, since it's part of refurbishment, part of a new building, or like an expansion, we thought, like, instead of, any of you who has ever done a refurbishment knows that it's like opening up a Pandora's box of misery as soon as you start sort of hammering on the wall panels, asbestos and other kind of things come out. So we thought, like, let's leave the existing building as it is, and really concentrate all of the new program, the 2 art museums and the lobby in a new consolidated building. The lower gallery is sort of nested into the hill, aligned with Main Street, so people walking by can look into the museum. And then the upper gallery is rotated to become the first thing you see. You can actually look into the upper gallery from Heber Avenue, almost like a friendly building, like turning its head to welcome visitors. So essentially we get this sort of public program sandwiched between the two galleries. And then we start like one of the big things, and when you're dealing in such a small community where everybody's like really obsessive about the identity of the village, it has this sort of raw charm of a repurposed mining town. This is going to be like probably the most significant building in the community. We also think like how could we somehow do something new that would sort of accommodate the galleries without totally sort of ruining the identity of the place. And also there was like a lot of talks about like why should like architects from the outside come and reinvent the city. Basically, a lot of the settlers that came to Utah were Scandinavians, and they brought with them this idea of log construction. All of the silver mines were actually made with interlocking logs that they also used for their houses. And in Utah, they've taken this technique further and sort of really refined in sort of rectangular sections, this sort of tectonic of this sort of massive wood construction. And even the hogans built by the Navajos, these like huts, are like quite complex structures made with like massive timber. And then finally, like the Southern Pacific Railroad used to go over the Salt Lake, and it was founded on piles of wood. They were like hammered into the salty water of the lake, and it's been like lying there for like decades and marinating, becoming what you call trestle wood. Now there's like since the railroad is gone, there's a company that extracts the timber, and it has become this sort of quite incredibly rich textured wood. So basically, we thought that, like, as architects, like especially since we've mostly been building like very, very affordable housing projects, everything is always built the same way. It's like stacked concrete elements, and any kind of material is going to be a finish you apply, almost like a veneer or like an image of wood in this case. So we were like totally into this idea that maybe we could really build something where what you see is what you get, that the building itself could almost be like a material sculpture, insulated and load bearing, all by the massive timber. So essentially we, like I think in the 10 years that we've been practicing, we've almost only made models out of foam. So this is the first wooden model coming out of the office, and it was this sort of example where the building is like the model is really built the same way that we would build the building itself. The thickness of the wood allows us to gradually create the transition between the two galleries. So we end up deploying this sort of incredibly traditional material, the material of the mining shafts and also like extracted from the Salt Lake to create a sort of a contemporary building, and sort of completely recreating, almost like awakening the ghost of the Coalition building. Even the Coalition building was this typical structure, industrial structure, that it's a wooden frame with the steel structure inside. And because of the climate demands of the galleries, the two galleries are made out of steel and with sort of climate control. And basically all of the circulation, all of the public spaces are then contained within the volume of the wooden frame. So the circulation itself is really sort of following the envelope of the building up to the roof. So this could be a sort of what it looks like looking up and down Main Street. Essentially the upper gallery and this new pivoting point of the city, sort of looking at you when you arrive into the lobby. You can visit the lower gallery, go up in the big public space, the restaurant in the middle, where that sort of also extends out on the roof of the existing garage. And finally, sort of following the wood and the light, you can sort of move past the administration up to the upper gallery. That becomes this very nice daylit gallery space that has this amazing view of the valley, and also becomes the first thing you see when you arrive into town. So in many ways, like in this almost like stealth exercise, we sort of
in a way, sort of totally recreated the former silhouette of the Coalition building, and in doing so also, in a way, created where the Coalition building was a landmark of this sort of industrial mining town. The new Kimball Art Center could be the sort of pivoting point of this sort of former industrial city now turning into a cultural mecca for art and cinema. And I think in many ways, we sort of realized that this seems to be sort of almost like a general tendency that, like, even in fashion, you quite often see that the main breakthroughs happen in working clothes or in sports clothes, that's where the material innovation, that's where all of the utility innovation is coming, and then sometimes it sort of gets appropriated by fashion. And in that sense, sort of industry and utility infrastructure is really the outer frontier of architecture work. And just like a handful of examples, I won't really explain them, but like almost like looking back at the work we're doing, we're currently building the Danish Maritime Museum, which is a repurposing of a former dry dock to create a museum. We took a sort of a polluted site, covered it with a wooden deck that also covers all the boat storage for a boat club. We're doing a museum that also serves as a bridge in a park. The Danish Pavilion in Shanghai so tried to create a streetscape where you could really bicycle through the pavilion and through the exhibition. So taking this idea and speaking of mixed use, in this case, this is probably the most dramatic mixed use we got. It's like 80% housing. But essentially putting the commercial spaces on the ground allowed us to create a sort of man-made mountain path that actually creates an extension of the completely flat landscape of Copenhagen, and actually invites social programs, encounters between the people to invade the three-dimensional space of the block. We appropriated a parking structure and turned it into a man-made mountain. We tried to sort of solve the housing, social housing needs of Copenhagen by wrapping it around a football field. And most recently, we've tried to turn the billion-dollar investment of doing a waste-to-energy power plant in Copenhagen and to turn it into a public park, allowing the Danes to exploit our cold weather and actually sort of do alpine skiing downtown Copenhagen. And as this idea broke through, we actually also transforming a ski resort or like a ski slopes in Finland into a hotel resort. This sort of urbanism where no surface is more flat than 7%, so you never have to walk with your skis. And it's sort of a general tendency. The last few examples, like what we're doing in New York, is essentially wedging a new building in between a sanitation plant and a power plant, and essentially trying to sort of continue the refurbishment of New York's waterfront that turns the industrial piers into parks and allow that to invade the sort of the three-dimensional space of the block itself. And lastly, in Canada, we're sort of in a site tortured by a highway that has sort of left it undeveloped in a very sort of dense downtown. We've sort of managed to wedge in a residential development that creates the sort of village between the legs of the highway. And some of our latest and largest projects, again, sort of this is a highway exchange in Stockholm where we are turning the highway exchange into sort of a man-made valley, almost like a canyon for the people of Stockholm, using all the excavation soil for the highway tunnels. And in Copenhagen, we're doing this project called the Loop City, which is essentially trying to combine all of the investments around a new train connection to tie southern Sweden and metropolitan Copenhagen into a continuous urban neighborhood where the train and this sort of infrastructure is really nested into the space itself. So maybe just to sort of recap this idea that you have a lot of examples of how sort of the infrastructure of the past can be sort of reappropriated, and it happens all the time. And the High Line in New York is one of the high-end examples of this. But there is also another potential, and I think for architects may be interesting. This is in Bangkok, a street where the sort of concrete elements have actually turned into like actually quite nice apartments for the poor population, and I think this is maybe where the potential is for a project like this, is that, or this idea of social infrastructure, is that as architects, and as Shohei mentioned, like it's very rare that we actually have much to say about what's gonna happen. But I think even in a time of crisis, one of the things that actually do remain is that the infrastructure of our cities and our countries, the highway projects, the power plants, the waste management facilities, the sewer systems, they're like these massive public investments that occupy huge chunks of the public budget. But on the city map, they become these sort of gray areas that are, if not wasted, they are at least like severely under-enjoyed, and these potentials could really be thought into to architecture, like even in third world countries or in developing countries where a very affluent minority have the demands of modern infrastructure. You know, maybe only 10% of the population is going to be driving the bullet train or going to be driving the car on the highway, but the highway is going to sort of carve through sort of tons of informal settlements, and rather than being something that cuts a wound through the landscape or casts shadows on the ground, it could really be thought of as an integrated part of a sort of an urban ecosystem. So that maybe this sort of idea of social infrastructure. This is in India, northeastern India. They have these amazing bridges that are not some kind of a dead zone in the city, but they're actually in the habitat, I don't know what you call it. But really like a living organism that doesn't like, none of these trees are killed. It's actually the roots that have been woven together to create a completely lively infrastructure. And I think as a potential, if we as architects could find ways of essentially harnessing the power of these investments and sort of in a way capturing not only the attention but also the engagement of people outside the field of architecture, we really do have, through the power of examples, the power to sort of become a central part in this sort of continuous collective concern it is to make sure that our cities and our buildings really fit with the way we want to live our lives, and really start considering the city not a sort of an accumulation of individual efforts, but really sort of try to sort of apply this holistic perspective that turns the city into a man-made or man-modified ecosystem.
Thanks. Somehow we were both trained with a TED Talk, but we both went over time. So somehow we have to go to questions. Or I want to say one thing. I think that one of within your kind of twist project, you have some, other twist project, but this Utah thing looks most compelling because you, of course, successfully combined, as you say, social infrastructure or construction technique that is very specific to the local. So the twist, of course, looks very natural compared to the, other twists that you're doing. And I mean, you told me the other day that you were more and more interested in smaller projects. Can you just say one thing about that? And then maybe we're going to hand it over to...
I mean, I think it has to do with... maybe paradoxically, we also somehow instantly satisfied our urge for dealing with big challenges. And I think this sort of idea of big impact with little effort is kind of exciting for an architect. And
I can already see your next book.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I think maybe sort of to this idea of a vocabulary. It's like I think one of the we are as interested in sort of formal innovation as anyone else. But in my mind, what if you look at at nature and at Darwinism and how things evolve through evolution, is that the creative moment is actually random. It's either accidental mutation, or it's the random coupling of the attributes of a maternal and a paternal organism. But what makes it evolve is the choice. So in a way, you have all these different possible forms. But I think what makes a difference and what continues this sort of ongoing urban evolution is the moment where you choose something and the reasons why you choose it and how this choice actually creates an impact and consequences that actually have desirable attributes or create desirable opportunities. And I think that's also why that architecture cannot just be standing alone as a glorious object or a finished piece. I think, even though that would be great, I think what we have to constantly make a strong effort to do is to make sure that everybody, and not just our colleagues and competitors, understand why this matters and why this is part of this bigger collective project we have of actually making sure that our planet accommodates us. I really like, if you look at the big picture, life evolved over time by adapting to the surroundings. So the organisms would constantly adapt to the surroundings, and eventually we would find caves that we could sleep in, and we would climb up in the trees. And the second we invented technology or tools or architecture, we acquired the power to reverse this evolution. And now we are adapting our environment to life. Yeah. And of course, we suffer the consequences, but also it has an amazing potential, and it's part of this ongoing evolution.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to talk more, but somehow I feel the pressure. So, yeah, no. So maybe if there's a question from the audience, something related to what we talked, if possible. If possible.
You mentioned at the beginning when you started talking, Bjarke, that life was lived forward, and you understand life looking backwards. And of course, architects build in the present. And OMA and BIG are very successful at designing for or pushing the conceptual argument to solve problems with your current sites and the conditions or restraints with your brief, or if the site is too big, if the site is too small, if light comes from this direction or that direction, and your buildings will twist and turn to accommodate those present problems. But as the next generation, or as the current generation of new influential architects, how much thinking, if any at all, do you put into your buildings about the future, the reaction that the city will have around it, other architects will have around it, or new buildings that will eventually be built around it that might have to twist another direction to respond to your buildings? And of course, there's a large part of design which needs to, or being influential with design, that needs to look not just about solving this problem with the site right now, but you're going to build something and it's going to have a reaction in the future. So how much thought is put into that, and if it hasn't been, what do you think now is going to be a reaction to the buildings and projects that you're creating?
If I may say first, I think the future is always in your equation, because you're basically, of course, building processes thinking about the future. But that's why I'm asking about the programmatic sustainability often, because what survives in the city currently, as you were saying, is a knowledge industry, a commitment, etc., culture, and not kind of form or building, the thickness of the wall. So I often think programmatically, if a building could have a future or could have a certain adaptive future. So in that regards, I think about it, but in the kind of construction level, you know, it's true that you're just dealing with the present. I mean, you're not, well, of course you're hoping for the future, but not really inventing something new that lasts more, 100 more. So that lifespan is not existing, but that's why maybe European architects especially have a privilege to do more urban planning, which is of course another time scale. That's a kind of total future. So isn't that also, is it really directly a future thinking? Or
I think, I think that in the 60s and 70s there was like some kind of, also because things were growing fast, there was like this obsession about, first of all, flexibility, which like led to sort of a lot of celebration of complete generic space that would allow all kinds of things to happen, but also what did happen was that they were so unstimulating that nothing happened. And then there was this idea of doing something that was like additive in the sense that you could extend it infinitely, and therefore again you sort of inhibited the possibility of doing anything concrete, because that would inhibit the potential of like effortless continuation. And I think today it's almost the opposite, because of those massive failures of the sort of the heroic modernist projects of the maybe the 60s and 70s. Now there is some kind of especially in urban planning, which is like maybe the one place where architects really do deal directly with the future and an attempt to accommodate the future. And I think there, the false conclusion right now is that because the heroic modernist projects seem to fail, maybe because of lack of diversity or whatever, but like the idea is that they were doing big plans that made bold gestures and really made a stake for something, and then they failed. Now there is almost the opposite in urbanism. There is this regime of sort of the neighborhoods that were nice were actually the neighborhoods that were like industrial and then got reappropriated and gentrified, and because of the diversity they seemed as nice. And now there tends to be a tendency in urban planning to try to paint the image in the plan of a neighborhood that has grown on its own. So in a way, like in urban planning, there's this tendency to really perpetuate the kind of spaces that we already have a lot of and are sort of working with. And I think there, like we almost stopped doing urbanism projects for this very reason, that anything that would actually try to boldly suggest an idea for the future would look suspicious, and anything that would look like almost like a copy-paste of another nice neighborhood with the same kind of boxes distributed slightly weirdly, would seem, this is nice because this seems to work. It works in Soho, so it could also work here. And I think in that sense, I do think that that especially if you look at progressive developments, like certain people believe in the singularity, like Ray Kurzweil's idea about the sort of accelerating returns on innovation, that maybe even looking not very far into the future, maybe 30 years, which is like the typical time frame of an urban master plan, the opportunities are so amazing that it's almost ridiculous that nobody addresses it in urban master plans. And just looking at urban mobility, I think at this point there's no doubt the cover of Wired US this month is the driverless car, a robot hand holding the gear shift. That's a nice cover, as always. But like these kind of futures, and I can't say that we have like seriously been dealing with it. We've been working a little bit on looking at the future of urban mobility, sponsored by Audi. But I think this kind of attention to the future and the urban and architectural impacts of things that are almost like beyond the horizon of our imagination is totally absent from architecture today and urban planning.
Hi. I'll be very quick because we're over time. Just a quick question. as an architect, you both have a lot of qualification. Maybe you can answer this one question that really bugs me. You talked about the architectural virgin, and when you have a client, it seems you're dealing with the virgin every single time. And when you were presenting your projects for OMA, you always said, "Oh, this is a very nice idea," didn't happen. "Oh, this is another great idea," didn't happen. So where's the success formula? Maybe you have at least sort of idea you can tell us. Where's the answer? Yeah, what's the secret of getting the client excited and making the project happen and not showing some images and saying, "Oh, it didn't happen"? I know it's a bold question.
No, I think if I portrayed a success from my talk, then I really succeeded today. But I don't think it's such a successful business model because, as you're saying, because we also believe in specificity that goes beyond the ideology. That's also, for me, a kind of a way to deal with the future, as you were just saying. It's very difficult to embrace that kind of cancellation of projects. But often, of course, the design extremely contributes to the cancellation, but often it goes beyond your, control. So, I don't know. The client, what we are showing is always approved by the client, so it's always a kind of a direction that we both took. So, I don't know if that's a success, or did it really look like success, or it looked really like a failure? Is that what you're saying?
No. I mean, this is the building behind you that I think is a success, and to get the client to actually build this is very successful.
Yeah, it takes a lot of.
Every day you seem to struggle, and sometimes you wish the architects would be the businessmen and understand it, and it'll be easier to build something like that.
But I must say, I think I tried to be my own client once, and I was a great I was a great client. Like me and some friends, we bought an old school, which is where my house is now in Copenhagen, and we were like 4 architects, and like 3 architects and 4 pop stars actually, we were gonna live there. We were gonna like refurbish the school, and then we were gonna live there ourselves. And there was gonna be like roughly half the apartments would be extra, and we were gonna sell them, and it was gonna be like this nice little place to live downtown Copenhagen. And then because we were gonna live there ourselves, it just had to be really nice, and we just made it super nice. And we had seen how we had made several developers, like for the VM houses, the mountains, they had like earned the millions, and our architectural fee was pretty much the same fee as the painters got from like painting the apartments white. So it felt kind of, we should definitely get in on this, and we can also make all the decisions ourselves. And as a result, we bought this old school. We bid on it when real estate prices were at their very highest, and we won the bid by bidding higher than everyone else. And then we could only take the school over 1 year later, which was at the point where construction prices were at the highest. And then construction got delayed because things had to be super nice. And then a year after that, we could put the extra 8 or 9 apartments on the market when the entire market was completely bust. So I think there is an interesting mechanism. But I mean, I must say I have a very nice apartment. It was way more expensive than I ever dreamed about. But there is something, I mean, I think the good thing about architecture and this sort of multiple input from multiple concerns is that everybody is contributing with their specific obsessions or their specific expertise. And as the architect, it's our role to combine all these concerns and sort of tie them into a sort of some kind of a synergy that
maximizes the potential of these different concerns coming together into a new building. And even though some concerns, especially economy and gravity maybe, limit our freedom of expression, somehow our job is to reveal how the world is and the maximum potential of the world we live in. It's not to it's not to dream of these sort of impossible castles. It's really to try to sort of get the very, very, very best out of what's exactly there now.
Sorry, very quickly. It seems that you've said before, Bjarke, about the world, about the sort of conceptions of the architect, and this idea of the misunderstood introvert character where the world doesn't fit into his own preoccupations and whatnot. It seems that there's a very palpable humour in your work, which is grounded and does have very intellectual kind of things behind it. To someone still in the world of studying architecture and not qualified yet, in such a gloomy time where nothing's been built, what would you advise to someone to keep that kind of interest and humour about your work and your outlook on life and the profession in general?
I mean, I think a very simple answer is to be the same person when you design and when you plan and when you are an architect as you are when you are, with your other friends, if you still have some. So like, but I think realistic, like that, it should be the same human being acting throughout the whole thing. So don't put on your architecture persona, and it's having spent a lot of time with Shohei is really exactly the way he talks about architecture. The sort of dry humor, so I think that's the trick. So like whatever it is that you bring to the table as a human being, keep it up.
Thank you.